When Charlotte Mason admonishes us that we don't have the right to pick and choose which subjects to educate our children in, her primary example is Latin. But we do not know how much we are shutting out from Tommy's range of thought besides the Latin grammar, she says. Latin itself is a means of providing our students with stimulating ideas. Join us today as we discuss the teaching of Latin in a Charlotte Mason education. Print your homeschool curriculum with Humble Heart Press. Faith-forward, family-owned, and made for homeschoolers. We're committed to being fast, affordable, and stress-free because your time is sacred and your story deserves to be printed beautifully. Welcome to A Delectable Education, the podcast that spreads the feast of the Charlotte Mason method. I'm Emily Kaiser, and I'm here with
Nicole Williams
and Liz Cottrell.
Well, we do not have a lot from Miss Mason on why she included Latin in her curriculum. It was really just a matter of course in that day and age. Education was virtually synonymous with classics in classic Latin languages. Yet she does tell us that we may not reject Latin as a subject for our children, not because of the traditional reasons that probably her fellow Brits at the time would say, but because Latin itself is a means of living ideas. And we can't predict which of our children are waiting to receive those ideas. Mm-hmm. She tells us, of course, it is only now and then that a notion catches the small boy, but when it does catch, it works wonders and does more for his education than years of grind. And all of that is in the context of talking about Latin. So, Nicole, let's just take a big picture look at the scope and sequence of Latin in a Charlotte Mason education. Do we start this like French at age 6?
Nope, for sure not. Thankfully, this one, we do not do it all in Form 1. And even in Form 2, which is Form 2 itself is grades 4, 5, and 6, but we don't begin this until what we call Form 2A, which is grade 5.
Right.
So, and at that point, it's simple reading, learning words. By the age 12, so towards the end of that time, they're supposed to have some elementary Latin grammar, be able to read fables and early tales. And she said possibly have read 1 or 2 books of Caesar. So
doesn't seem like that little.
It doesn't really, does it? But then by Form 3, so grade 7, 8, they're continuing the Latin grammar, which I think is also one of the really valuable parts of Latin. Translation increases. They start doing parsing and rule application. On an exam for Form 3, we see that they are translating into English and back to Latin and parsing each word of a sentence and identifying their grammatical rules. So they're really doing a lot. But then in Form 4, that's 9th grade, the caliber of the books increases that they're reading in Latin. They're reading more substantial classical texts in that language. Fables, more Caesar, perhaps Virgil. And then in Forms 5 and 6, so 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, they're just continuing to read Latin authors. And translation and comprehension are really at a high level at this point. So,
and by parsing, you just mean pointing out the parts of speech, like knowing which is the nominative case and which is the adjective and things like that.
Yeah. Do you want to share before we go on how your students who, I don't know if this is the best time to do this, but you have shared with us that your dyslexic students were particularly thankful for Latin studies.
Yeah.
Well, my son too.
Yeah, it was really an odd thing because with dyslexia, there's often some memory issues, a foreign language was really hard for them.
And also it's like entirely written down, right?
Yeah,
Like, I mean, they're speaking it, but they have to read it in order to learn
the part that they can't do.
Yeah. But there was something about the structure and the just really straightforward rules that I think were very helpful to them. And it helped them with English, with spelling and stuff like that. So
interesting.
They actually, we went ahead with it, not, right on target time-wise, but I went ahead and introduced it just kind of on faith. And It was really
looking
popular.
back. And you never knew that until after they had graduated that they felt
See,
like it was
what
so
my
helpful.
son liked was that he could find the verb. He knew it was at the end of the sentence.
Yeah, that's what I
And
mean.
that
Like
just
very
stuff like that,
straightforward.
it helps. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the English language isn't always quite so straightforward.
It definitely is not. And there's fascinating reasons why that is, but we will talk about that a different day. So let's talk about the lesson format. First of all, in the week, students from 2A through 6, so 5th grade through 12th grade, 2 Latin lessons, 30 minutes, or twice a week for 30 minutes. So an hour a week. They do that, though, for all of those 8 years. Whereas many other Latin curriculum, and we get this question all the time,
5 hours a week.
they're expecting it to be done in like a classical school, or maybe even some private or public school classrooms where they're doing the same subjects every single day for about an hour. And so it's about 5 hours a week. So we just have a lot longer to go over that same material. But because of that, it's slower, it's building on it, and we're not learning something and losing it, right?
Cram isn't always great.
Yeah, yes, she uses that word in a very derogatory sense. We're always talking about how Latin was taught during her time. So Latin is a dead language. People will quibble over that term because people do, I mean, we can say the words, but
Churches still use it.
Yeah, sure, but the definition of a dead language is one that no child is born and that is their native tongue. So it is. Many people learn and can speak Latin around the world, but it is not something anybody picks up as their native tongue. And so because of that, it does have a different method in Charlotte Mason. I just want to make that distinction very clear because we've been talking for the last couple episodes on how we acquire speech, and hearing and speaking. Yeah. And so we are starting with the grammar, and we are going to be reading it from the get-go. Okay. So because of that, it varies from those modern languages. It's still, however, there is the use of narration, which is very Charlotte Mason. This is what she felt like her method did bring to the subject that was still, and just when you're saying they're reading these texts, even from like by 12 years old, like 6th, 7th grade, they are also narrating them. It's not just translation. They are acquiring it as a speech. It's just different than we would.
And it does sound intimidating for us to say Caesar, but I don't think we have any concept of how short the Roman letters were.
It's true.
They make the epistles in the New Testament look positively.
Lengthy. Yeah.
So they're not long readings.
Like 2nd and 3rd John are long letters.
So don't be intimidated
And
to give your child
shortness.
a piece of Caesar.
Yeah. Charlotte Mason said that Latin is taught by means of narration after each section has been thoroughly studied in grammar, syntax, and style. The literature studied increases in difficulty as the student advances in grammar. Nothing but good Latin is ever narrated. It's the same, no twaddle, no Latin twaddle. So the pupil acquires style as well as structure. So if you haven't yourself any experience with Latin, we have a program that we would recommend, and that is Visual Latin. I'm actually kind of doing resources out of order here. I hope that's okay.
Free advertising here.
But it is a very enjoyable lesson with a Latin instructor in his video lessons. And he actually does a translation of Genesis 1 that they work on translating into English and narrating back
right at the
very beginning. He uses simpler words and sentence structure, but is doing that. So it is good. There's also, of course, other traditional courses like Cambridge Latin or Lingua Latina that do base their curriculum on stories. So we can still use that narration component.
And could I just say that if you're going to look for an online course, which there are many, just look for those that have these elements that we've talked about.
Exactly.
Other people have very rigid, strict memorization of just a lot of tedium.
And so reading from stories, seeing full Latin sentences, and then being able to reproduce those as in narration. And that's why I wanted to highlight those resources before I talk about the other things I usually discuss in these episodes. So there's prep to be done. If you yourself do not Latin and are not familiar, it really does help to work through the Latin lessons ahead of your kids, because they may have some questions and you might go, I do not have any idea how to help you. And usually we can do those much faster because we are familiar with words. We're familiar with the roots in our English that come from Latin. So That would be the number one tip I would give you. Our objectives are to increase their understanding and use of Latin. Pretty straightforward. Yeah, that's all I have. What objections or questions do people commonly have about teaching Latin?
Right. I think it's very interesting because as I've studied a lot of history of recent days, read several history spines, they all bring up the fact that Latin went out of the secondary education or postgraduate education system around the turn of the century. And Charlotte Mason continued to use it.
Yeah.
She didn't do anything just because it was or wasn't done elsewhere. She always had a purpose for it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really good to know the why of what you're doing here. And we've talked a little bit about that here in this class.
Even the English grammar, and when you read about it in this section of Volume 6 that we've been going through this season, it's actually in Home Education where she talks about English grammar. She said Latin grammar is actually more straightforward and helps a child understand English grammar.
Oh, absolutely. And
lots of benefits.
Countless moms have reported to me that their children are just whizzing along in grammar once they start the Latin. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a great connection there. And I just want to encourage moms. I know we all feel we can't add another thing to our plate. But as Emily said, if you would just do the lessons ahead of your children, I actually found it to be kind of soothing. It was like solving a puzzle. It was very straightforward. It wasn't ambiguous at all. And it was like, sowing new ideas in my mind. I thought it was nourishing to me, actually. Mm-hmm. And I do enjoy languages, but it was just fascinating to discover things, I felt like. And of course, we know that a lot of our language is based in the Latin, as much as 60%, maybe coming from the Romance languages, Italian, German, Spanish, and
German's
French.
Not a
It is a Latin-based language, though, okay. And a lot of the German grammar is very close to the Latin grammar. So
I learn something new every day.
Yeah, well, I didn't get far enough in German to really concur that fact, but that's what I've been told. But I think what you said about the dead language, part of that is to realize that all languages are very fluid. Yes. Words that we say today, I've used words that I used when I was a child and had my children just freak out, like, what are you saying? Because it has a different meaning now.
Yeah, but Latin doesn't change like that.
And Latin doesn't. And so for your children who really maybe are a little OCD and they just like things to be true or not true, and they're very black and white, they will love Latin. And what Mason loved about it is that it teaches precision, that there actually is such a thing as an exact meaning, and it doesn't have 1,000 shades of gray to it. And so that's what helps them with the translation. So whatever program you pick out, make sure that they are doing a lot of translating back and forth between English and Latin. And it is still very much with us. I have talked to moms that keep a little booklet for their kids, and whenever they spot Latin phrases anywhere, they put it in their book, and they have discovered hundreds of them just living life, all your science, your nature, nomenclature, all the species are Latin, right?
Yeah. Carl Linnaeus gave him a Latin-ish name.
Right.
Himself in there.
And then it's really fun to know what a flower is by that Latin thing, because you're like, oh, that means red, and that means branching or whatever, so and medical terminology. I used to be a medical transcriptionist way back in the dark ages, and I had to memorize hundreds, probably was, roots, prefixes, suffixes. I always knew what the doctor was talking about because of the words. And I still find that when friends are going through medical things, or I am, that I understand a lot of the terms, they'll start to translate it. And it's really, it does have still very practical value.
Two things. One, my friends in high school who were, applying to prestigious universities, all studied Latin on their own. And it was, to help with ACT, like the word component,
vocabulary.
Right? Vocabulary. That's the word I'm looking for. I know.
Vocabulary is what she's looking for.
But I was saying, isn't there a PNEU article, a PR article or somewhere about someone saying it's sad, like when we don't know the Latin because we see the relationship between species more than what the common name of plants or whatever.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you remember that
I don't
thing?
remember it.
Okay, but just that we miss connections because we aren't familiar with the Latin. And just this is what Charlotte Mason means when she says there's living ideas to be explored and discovered in these things.
Right.
Just this week, my boys are reading their Roman history book, and it said Veni Vidi. Oh, no, it was in our Plutarch. And Plutarch translates, or doesn't translate. I mean, he does. He says Veni Vidi Vici, right? And says, I came, I saw, I conquered. But he says, but in no other language is it so pleasant to come off the tongue as in Latin. So, even Plutarch.
Yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned missing the connection in a totally separate subject, but I wanted to point out as we come to Latin here that if you've listened to all of our episodes on this language acquisition, you see not only how each one has some of those same overarching principles with how it's learned. You see narration all the time. You see translating back and forth. You see, in most cases, not this one, but hearing before you're seeing and things like that. You see the logic that is there and how this is almost like a brain exercise, a lot of these things. But I hope that people also see the connection between each one of these lessons to one another and how every one of them helps. You know, we just said, how Latin helps us with English and also with all of the Romance languages
and
or
science.
So there's so much interconnection, and we are always saying that. You know, don't just drop one part. And you started with that, like
because
Latin's
you don't
the
know
one you think
you don't know what you're going to be, kind of crippling yourself with if you pull out
you're
a
like
component.
it's like this whole tangled web of things, and you just pull out a piece of it, and what is lost in those other subjects because you don't have that.
And
part of it.
Sometimes people really want to learn Greek, and I commend that. I've been trying to learn Greek on my own for several years, in fits and starts, because I really do want to read and understand like the original biblical texts that were written in Greek. But I think the harder barrier to that is you have to learn a totally different alphabet, whereas you don't with Latin, right? Like that does make it more accessible, and maybe Greek is another, like, don't just stop. I mean, I think this is the whole point of Charlotte Mason education is we are continuing to educate and build relationships and educate ourselves more and gain knowledge for the rest of our lives.
And the skills of translation in Latin will help you with the skills in translating. And a lot of the like noun cases and verb conjugations, the terminology is similar in Greek, and it's not ever used in English in most schools now. Yeah. They come up with much easier names for things. So,
well, we'll be right back.
When it comes to printing your homeschool curriculum, you deserve a partner who understands the heart behind the work. Humble Heart Press, run by a homeschool mom of 5 sons, is here to make your printing simple, beautiful, and affordable. We offer lay-flat tape-bound books that are perfect for teacher's guides, wire-bound books for that easy 360-degree flip, gorgeous art prints, flashcards, lamination, oversized maps, and more, all thoughtfully made with the homeschooler in mind. And our custom keepsake journals? They're a heartfelt favorite. Each journal features a personalized cover with your child's name, a special keepsake page with their photo, and your choice of custom notebooking page styles perfectly tailored to each subject, culminating in a treasured keepsake of your best homeschool days together. Humble Heart Press prints with purpose to preserve your time and energy for what matters most. So send your PDF to a company that cares, and we'll ship you beautiful books straight to your doorstep. Visit us at humbleheartpress.com.
We are so glad you joined us for the discussion today. Next week, we will turn our attention to the arts and dig into one of the most distinctive lessons in the feast, picture study. Thanks for joining us as we continue to spread the feast of the Charlotte Mason method.
If you benefited from this conversation, please like and subscribe. We hope our discussion serves to equip and encourage you as we seek to explain the Charlotte Mason method. You can find the show notes in the video description or by visiting adelectableeducation.com/episodes. There, you'll find the links and quotes we mentioned in today's episode. We are so grateful for our loyal Patreon supporters who help make this show possible. If you'd like to partner with us in our work here at A Delectable Education, you can join our Patreon community and receive exclusive and early content as our thank you for your monthly support. Find out more at patreon.com/adelectableeducation. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time.